Hi guys, after the relative success of my previous video, I've decided to make another one. Yes, I thought I would roll with it and maximize the momentum I've got fresh in this new year, the first few days of 2021. And much like the previous video, the origin is the same. It appears I've started taking requests.
I wrote this. I only play songs I've written myself. So.
You went home to get it.
So thank you very much to Jamie Thomas, who asked me which commentators inspired me. So I've decided to take a relatively broad interpretation of this question, and I will be looking at commentators from all across the sporting spectrum that inspired me, both when I was younger, during my teenage years when I really had that first notion of potentially becoming a commentator, and even to this day some of the other broadcasters that I can now call peers and colleagues that are doing a very, very good job. In case you're not familiar with my channel, if you're here for the first time, just by way of introduction, my name is Patrick Kendrick. I am a conference interpreter specializing in football, and I also work as a commentator on football specifically. I'm based in Milan and I work on the Serie A world feed, so commentating on games from the Italian top flight which go all around the world. So let's move on to the topic of today's video, which is the commentators that have inspired me. First of all, you need to consider the context that I grew up in. I was born in 1986, so a lot of the football I was watching was in England in the mid to late 90s. The Champions League was shown on ITV, so that was available on free-to-air television. And besides that, we didn't have much else unless you subscribed to Sky, which we didn't in my household. So there was Football Italia on Channel 4. They would show one game a week on a Sunday.
Campionato di calcio italiano.
So essentially, that meant a relatively small sample size in terms of the voices that I was exposed to. Thankfully, they were brilliant voices. Brian Moore and then latterly Clive Tyldesley, who just had the most iconic voices. You heard them and you instantly were taken to some foreign field in Europe for the Champions League. It was just so exotic. It was really exciting. You heard the theme tune, the Champions League anthem when the programme credits started, and then the matches were typically very good because there was one or max two English sides involved at that time. Quick confession to make, I was a Manchester United fan for the first 12 years of my life until I moved from Weybridge down to Winchester, and then proximity led me to become a Southampton fan. Sadly, that support has waned. It's gone hand in hand really with the way my career's developed. It's not particularly a good idea to have too much of a fervent support when you are working as a broadcaster. You can always be accused of bias, but there you go. I've let that cat out of the bag. But as I said, so often when I was growing up for Christmas, I would get these season review tapes or year in review VHS at that time. They were Manchester United. They were my favourite team because I used to look up to Peter Schmeichel. And Brian Moore was often the voice on those because whenever they would show Champions League matches, then Brian Moore would be the voice on that. I remember one in particular when Manchester United were beaten 4-0, I believe, by Barcelona without Cantona, without Schmeichel, because there was still some rather old-fashioned, outdated, draconian rules with regards to the number of non-British players that could compete. And they were absolutely thrashed by a side featuring the likes of Romario. And I remember Brian Moore saying, "It's a bad night for Manchester United, it's a bad night for Sir Alex Ferguson," or perhaps it was the other way around. Such a simple line, but with his voice, it was just so evocative. It was fantastic.
Frank de Boer, and Ravanelli's in there. Vial is waiting for something. It's in there. It crossed the line.
Then Clive Tyldesley picked up the baton and did a wonderful job. 1999 really culminating with that Champions League victory for United against Bayern Munich. Can Manchester United score? They always score, and Solskjaer has won it. The lines are just so iconic. You could pick out 3 or 4 from that one match alone. And then when I was at university, it was still Clive Tyldesley when Liverpool came back to win against AC Milan in that famous Champions League final when they were trailing by 3-0. That was my first year of university, so that must have been 2005. So the first names and broadcasters that I were exposed to were Brian Moore and Clive Tyldesley on ITV, and then Peter Brackley on Channel 4 with Football Italia. His voice was just so unique. You would hear it and you would instantly know it was him.
The block by Carlasciali. Batistuta. Now Rui Costa. Such intelligent distribution then. Carlasciali. Batistuta. Is this going to be number 2? Oh, what a strike by Gabriel Batistuta.
And once again, Italian football was exotic, it was exciting, it was very different, and it was what we're being exposed to. It was when Serie A was the best league in the world, and who knows, perhaps that had some bearing on me ultimately moving to Italy, making my life here and becoming very involved in the Italian game. So those are the early influences when I was a child and then into my teens and then latterly into university as well. So I would describe that category as what I'd call the iconic voices. Now I want to just come up with one example of a commentator from various different sports just to show different facets of the job that we do. And I'm going to start with a catchphrase. I'm not particularly into gimmicky lines or certain sound bites, but some people just have a catchphrase, and like all good catchphrases, it develops organically, it's not forced, but it is John Virgo on the snooker. Once again, this is a clear sign of ultimately how much you're influenced is all down to what you're exposed to. Snooker was always on the television growing up in England. The World Championships were on every year. There are other tournaments as well. And John Virgo was one of the many very good voices covering that sport on the green baize. And he has a very simple line when he thinks that someone's about to make a foul and pot the cue ball, and he simply says, "Where's the cue ball going?" Which is a terrible impression, but you'll forgive me that. So in terms of catchphrase, first up we've got John Virgo.
Where's the cue ball going?
Foul.
The next example I like to give comes from the world of cricket. Richie Benaud was often held up as one of the greatest commentators, not just of his age, but of all time, because he kept it simple, he didn't say too much. And he often said that you should only really say something if you feel you can add to the spectacle. And that's certainly true. And it's something that we all wrestle and grapple with, I think. But Richie Benaud had a remarkably good sense of humour. So I think that's something we'd all love to say, oh, he's very funny on commentary. Football doesn't necessarily lend itself as well as cricket does, because a football match is 90 minutes. It's crash, bang, wallop. It's high intensity and high octane. The tempo's always high, you hope. The bigger the occasion, the bigger the spectacle. But cricket is obviously a lengthy sport. A test match lasts for 5 days. If played properly, there can be rain delays, and occasionally there might be some amusing cutaways. And Richie Benaud really was the master of bringing a smile to people's faces and making them chuckle with some of his pithy lines. So, sense of humour, Richie Benaud.
Now, what would people from Mars think if they were to land here and see that happening on your television screen?
A lot of slip, slap, slop going on out there today. Aussie, Aussie, Aussie. Oi, oi, oi.
As for word choice, I've decided to go for a commentator that I discovered a lot later. It's someone from the US, Jim Nantz, who is unbelievably talented. If I'm not mistaken, Jim Nantz every year does the college basketball. I think they call it the Final Four or something like that. You'll have to correct me, those that are familiar with US sports. He also then commentates on the Super Bowl and the Masters from Augusta, what they call a triple threat. But it's astonishing, really. I think it must be one of a kind to find a commentator really at the highest level in 3 different sports, and 3 huge sports as well in the US. I'm a big golf fan. I'm a big Tiger Woods fan, which you may know if you've ever seen my Twitter feed. And Jim Nantz's commentary of the 1997 Masters, when Tiger Woods won his first ever green jacket by a record margin, was just astonishing in terms of word choice. So I've decided to isolate Jim Nantz in terms of picking the words, choosing the right vocabulary, timing, tone, all of that. It really is a masterclass. And so I think that's something that we can all learn from. What do we say? How do we say it? When do we say it? And I'd love to be able to incorporate some of his traits into my own commentary, but a long way to go on that. So word choice, Jim Nantz.
A rhapsody of total appreciation and awe that a virtuoso performance like Augusta has never seen.
I can tell you this, Kenny. The depth of this kid's preparation for this stage, for this moment, just runs so deep. There's no doubt in my mind he's very aware of the significance of this putt.
There it is, a win for the ages.
And finally, I'd just like to make mention of a couple of current commentators who are still plying their trade and who are brilliant. Andrew Cotter and Ewan Murray. I've always been relatively fond of the Scottish accent, but their lilt really lends itself well to the sports that they do. Ewan Murray on golf for Sky, and Andrew Cotter does a bit of everything for the BBC. Brilliant voices and just really nice to listen to. So there you have it, almost piece by piece and trying to build my ideal commentator, but shades of John Virgo for the catchphrase, Richie Benno for the sense of humour, Jim Nance for his word choice, all of those iconic voices from my childhood, so Brian Moore, Clive Tilsley and Peter Brackley, and then finally the likes of Ewan Murray and Andrew Cotter, all across the sporting spectrum, people we can learn from, people we can look up to, and voices that have inspired me. I hope you've enjoyed that. Jamie, I hope I answered your question. Thank you very much once again for asking it. Please keep engaging. Give me a thumbs up if you like my videos. Make some more requests by all means. I'm enjoying the process of making videos. Subscribe if you haven't done already, and I'll see you on the next one. Cheers, guys.